If you or someone you love wore a military uniform before 1985, I need 3 minutes of your time today. Because there's a group of benefits sitting inside the VA system that a lot of older veterans have simply never heard of. Not because anyone's hiding it from you, but because it's old, it's easy to miss, and the VA doesn't exactly send out a postcard reminding you. By the end of this video, you're going to know 3 things: who this actually applies to, the honest mistakes that cause people to miss out on money they've earned, and one detail near the end that even some VA-savvy families don't know about. If you served any time before the mid-1980s, whether that was Korea, Vietnam, the peacetime years in between, or even a stretch stateside that never saw combat, you may fall into one of a few categories the VA treats differently than more recent veterans. You don't have to have been wounded, and you don't have to have a documented combat injury to potentially qualify for ongoing VA support. That one fact alone stops a lot of older veterans from ever applying, because they assume VA benefits are only for people with visible injuries. That assumption, more than anything else, is what causes this money to go unclaimed. There's a program called VA Pension, sometimes called Veterans Pension, and it's different from VA Disability Compensation, which is the one most people know about. Disability compensation is tied to an injury or illness connected to your service. Pension is different. It's a needs-based benefit for wartime veterans who meet certain income and asset guidelines, and it doesn't require your condition to be connected to your service at all. It just requires that you served during a recognized wartime period, that you're permanently and totally disabled, or age 65 or older, and that your household income falls under a certain threshold. A lot of veterans hear VA benefits and think strictly combat-related. This program breaks that assumption completely, and it's one of the most overlooked parts of the entire VA system. Now, here's where it gets interesting for anyone who served before 1985 specifically. Back in 1978, and again with later reforms, the VA changed how pension benefits were calculated going forward. But, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, veterans who were already receiving pension under the older rules were allowed to stay on those older calculations if it worked out better for them. These are sometimes referred to as old law pension or Section 306 pension recipients. If that's you, or if that was a parent or spouse of yours who's been quietly receiving a VA pension check for decades under an old formula, there are protections built in for you that newer applicants don't get. Families sometimes don't realize this when a veteran passes away, and a surviving spouse may still be entitled to continued support under those same older, sometimes more favorable terms. Because most retirees assume every VA rule applies the same way to everybody. It doesn't. The VA has decades of overlapping rule changes, and older veterans often fall into legacy categories that newer veterans simply aren't eligible for. That's not a loophole, it's just how the system evolved, and it's exactly the kind of detail that gets lost between generations of paperwork. There's one more important category affecting specifically veterans who were stationed at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina between 1953 and 1987. If you or a family member served there for at least 30 days during that window, you may be eligible for benefits tied to water contamination that occurred on base. This isn't a rumor or internet theory. The VA has established presumptive conditions connected to that exposure, meaning you don't necessarily have to prove your illness came from the water. If you served there and later developed certain cancers or other qualifying conditions, this is worth looking into directly through va.gov or with an accredited Veterans Service Officer, because it applies to a huge range of service members who passed through that base over more than 3 decades, many of whom never even think of themselves as having a toxic exposure claim. Alright, quick pause. If this is the kind of information that actually helps you feel more in control of your benefits, go ahead and hit like on this video and consider subscribing. It genuinely helps this channel reach more veterans and retirees who need this exact kind of plain English breakdown, and I've got more coming that walks through these programs one at a time.
Now let's talk about the honest mistakes that keep veterans from getting what they're entitled to. Mistake number 1. Assuming that because you didn't file a claim decades ago, it's too late now. It's not. VA disability claims and pension applications don't expire the way some people think they do. You can apply today for conditions connected to service that happened 40, 50, even 60 years ago, especially if that condition has worsened over time or if new presumptive conditions have been added since you last checked. Mistake number 2, assuming your income disqualifies you from pension. The VA's income calculation isn't just your gross income. Certain medical expenses, including money spent on prescriptions, home care, or assisted living, can be deducted from what counts against you. A lot of retirees look at the surface level income limit, assume they're over it, and walk away without realizing their actual countable income is much lower once deductions are applied. Mistake number 3, and this one is big for military spouses and widows, assuming that when the veteran passes away, all benefits simply stop. That's not always true. There's a program called Survivor's Pension for the surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, and if the veteran was receiving aid and attendance because they needed help with daily living, the surviving spouse may be able to apply for that same kind of additional support if they meet the criteria themselves. Families sometimes let this slip through the cracks during a difficult time, simply because paperwork is the last thing on anyone's mind after losing a spouse. Let's talk about aid and attendance for a moment, because this is one of the most underclaimed benefits in the entire VA system. If you're a wartime veteran or a surviving spouse of one, and you need help with daily activities like bathing, dressing, or managing medication, or if you're housebound due to a disability, you may qualify for an additional monthly amount on top of your regular pension. This isn't automatic. You have to apply for it specifically, and a lot of veterans who are already receiving basic VA pension don't realize this extra layer exists. It's designed exactly for the reality a lot of older veterans are living in right now, needing a little extra help at home, or paying for in-home care, or covering costs at an assisted living facility. If that sounds like your situation or someone in your family, this is worth asking about directly rather than assuming you already know your full benefit picture. Now for the one that even people who think they understand VA benefits tend to miss. When the VA reviews eligibility for these older programs, they don't just look at your income for this year. In certain circumstances, unreimbursed medical expenses from the prior 12 months can be used to reduce your countable income going forward, which means a bad medical year, the kind none of us want but many of us have, can actually work in your favor when it comes to qualifying or increasing what you receive. Very few people bring this up in casual conversation because it sounds almost too specific to matter, but for veterans living on a fixed income with rising healthcare costs, this single detail has been the difference between qualifying and not qualifying for support they genuinely needed. If you've had a year with significant medical bills, don't assume that's just a loss. It may directly help your case. None of these programs run through some hidden office or secret application. Everything I've mentioned today, VA pension, old law pension protections, Camp Lejeune presumptive conditions, survivor's pension, and aid and attendance are handled through the same VA system you may already be familiar with, and the most reliable way to check your specific situation is directly through va.gov by calling the VA or by working with a free accredited veteran service officer through organizations like the DAV or VFW. These service officers don't charge you anything, and their entire job is helping veterans and families navigate exactly this kind of overlapping, decades-old rule structure. If any of what you heard today sounds like it could apply to you or someone in your family, that's the next step. Not guessing, not assuming, just asking directly and getting a real answer based on your specific service record. If you served before 1985, you may fall into legacy VA programs that newer veterans don't have access to. Your income eligibility might be different than you assume once medical expenses are factored in, and if a loved one has passed away, there may still be survivor benefits available that nobody automatically tells you about. The single most important thing to remember from everything we covered today is this. VA benefits for older veterans are not automatic, and they are not something the system simply hands to you. They require an application, even decades after service, and even if you assumed you'd already missed your chance. The one action I'd encourage you to take today is simple. reach out to an accredited veteran service officer or check directly on va.gov just to ask whether your specific service history and circumstances line up with any of what we talked about. It costs you nothing but a little time, and for some families, it's meant a meaningful difference in monthly support during retirement. You've earned the right to ask these questions, and you've earned whatever support the system owes you. Take care of yourself